I hope that we have Professor Monroe on the line now.
I'm with you now, Bruce.
You're with me now?
Yes, absolutely. And for me,
are you one of those buried under 3 feet of snow?
it feels that way, but not really. I'm actually in Fort Lauderdale in Florida, which is pretty chilly, but thankfully none of that snow. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Today we're talking about governance. When you taught me government and politics at the University of the West Indies more than 50 years ago, Lord have mercy, more than 50 years ago.
Yep. Boy, I can't believe it.
That word was not in the lexicon. When did this business of governance emerge as an area that needs to be focused on?
I think in the 1990s, and what it allows us to do is not just to focus on the formal structures of what we call government, but rather the way in which organizations which impact how society functions are actually run. In other words, the structure of power. So you have governance in communities now, which unfortunately in Jamaica and many of the 700-odd communities is governance by gangs. So what it does allow us to do is look at governance outside of government, how our public, private sector corporations run, etc., etc. So it does broaden it, but it does not allow us to forget the fundamental structures that you've been talking about. And I want to commend you on the quality of the program and the inputs you have had. At the same time as commend you, I don't think I've ever done this publicly, for actually putting forward one of the most comprehensive and critical programs for strengthening Jamaica's governance. And I'd invite all listeners to go back and look at your presentation as Prime Minister on May the 7th, 2010, where you actually outlined 14 items which would strengthen Jamaica's governance arrangements, 8 of which have so far been done: the appointment of a special prosecutor for corruption, whistleblower legislation, INDICOM, the libel law reformation. Many people don't recall that this was arising from the initiative which you begun to remove criminal libel from our legislation. So I wanted to mention this and to say that the remaining aspects of the agenda you outlined remain absolutely important. The provision for the impeachment of public officials, you indicated that in 2010 as a critical element of our governance. Term limits for the Prime Minister, this is another proposal you put forward. Vesting constitutional authority in the Electoral Commission, critical. Right now, our Electoral Commission, which is a world leader, can be simply abolished by a majority vote in a government so minded. The question of a criminal sanctions for breaches of the award of contracts. That was one of the proposals we put forward, which Janet referred to the extraordinary levels at which right now that whole procurement process is being violated. The issue of parliamentary oversight of the appointment of certain statutory positions. These are all.
Well, let me ask you this, Trevor. I don't know if you were able to hear the discussion I had with Janet Calder, but she said to me that 67% of the contracts awarded over the last 15 years were in breach of the procurement guidelines.
Absolutely. Let me give you another.
Where was that ball dropped?
Well, let me tell you, the Auditor General's report last year looked at a compendium of awards of public contracts for infrastructure alone. 769 contracts over a period of 4 or 5 years. Do you know what percentage was awarded on the basis of competitive tender? 9%. 9%. So this is a huge area where law needs to be enforced. And one of the areas of enforcement, of course, is Section 20 of the Financial Administration and Audit Act, which provides the Financial Secretary with the authority after investigation to tell officers who are in breach, pay back the money.
Trevor, hold that point there. Let me digest that point there. I have to take the final break of the program, but I'm coming back to you in less than 5 minutes. We're talking with Professor Trevor Monroe. We're talking about the question of governance. Trevor, what I wanted to ask you is this. You identified a number of things that are still on the to-do list, no? Like the impeachment of public officials. And I think you acknowledge that there are a number of things that are in place. Are they working efficiently? Are we making them work? And I want to add a rider to that. I don't know that it's reasonable to ask government to hold government accountable. I don't think it's reasonable to ask government to put their own feet in the fire. To what extent is civil society sufficiently alert, assertive, engaged to not only make sure that the provisions, the framework that we already have in place, like the question of the award of contracts, to make sure that it works as it's supposed to work, and to also put pressure on the to-do list to get those things off that list and implemented. Where are we?
Short answer, not doing enough. Longer answer, it takes cash to care. What we have found is that when civil society and is experienced is instructive in this regard, when we're pushing hard in relation to public visibility, as you know, in Jamaica, out of sight, out of mind, we get very significant response from the public. And I give you one example where a plus that has been very little noticed, and that is in relation to the matter of tolerance of bribery. That was over 50% on the surveys done in the middle of it, 2006, 2007. By 2012, 13, that had gone down to below 30, about 32%.
Which one is that?
One of the tolerance of bribery.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Which is identified in the studies that have been done in the hemisphere as one of the most important. In fact, we were the leading country in terms of the decline in tolerance of bribery. But your broader question is, are the systems working? And I would say, yes, they're working in relation to the Auditor General's Department. Yes, they're working in relation to other institutions. Where I think the gap is the one to which you point. And that is the extent to which public pressure, citizen engagement, allows the rest of the system to work. And I give you the example that we were just talking about. Those 769 contracts awarded for infrastructure, road infrastructure in particular, worth 8.9 billion Jamaican dollars, Bruce, and only 9% to competitive tender. So you're talking about two issues here. One is a country with scarce resources that can't pay our police or teachers or nurses not being assured of getting value for money that we're spending. And the second issue, even more important, this business of the rule of law to which you have been referring all along. Inequality before the law, identified and diagnosed as early as 2007, the Justice Sector Reform Task Force, where the wealthy litigant, well-connected litigant, is far more likely to either evade or get away. That continues to today. Just contemplate this. Could you or I break a law and the disclosure that we have broken the law is apparent for 10 years and nothing happens? That's the situation with many of our public bodies, spending billions of dollars, breaking the law.
But you know, Trevor, where I have the difficulty, and I'm not providing any cushion for any public official, particularly elected ones. But as I said to Jeanette Calder earlier, if somebody were to post a video of me beating the hell out of my wife, or pointing a gun at somebody's head, or flogging my child to death, police going to be at my door very quickly. Why? Not because anybody made a complaint, not because anybody given a statement, but because they have now been provided with information through a Facebook post of something that is against the law. And they're going to come there because they're going to want to see the gun that I was pointing at somebody to see whether I had licensed. The point I'm making is the Auditor General presents a report. There is information you say about a public official who for 10 years has not complied with the law.
It's a public agency.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, who is it, and why doesn't that who take the necessary action to put that official before the court? I mean, what they're waiting on? They're waiting on some civil society organization to put pressure, or they're waiting on some call from somebody to say, good God, man, this thing been going on for 10 years. Do something about it, no? The ball is being dropped at places where, quite frankly, if I was in office today, I would want to take out a sample of them, and I would want to say, now, who is it that failed to do what they were supposed to do here, so?
Absolutely. Now, the question then turns to a matter of leadership. For 5 years, with all that we have seen disclosed by extraordinarily positive work by our investigative journalists, by Auditor General, matters have been referred and not one single surcharge under the law has been imposed on any public official. No. In August 2020, the Financial Secretary wrote a circular to every single public body saying, look, this chronic violation of law has to cease. If it doesn't cease, we're going to take action. And I'm noticing in 2021, the recommendation from the Auditor General that a surcharge be investigated to be imposed on the former acting permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education. I'm hoping and praying that that represents a turning point, largely because of the extent of public exposure, public outcry, which is an important component, I think you were looking at earlier on, to getting action from the authorities. Whether it's action to appoint the Chief Justice, who should not have been kept acting, but was appointed within 1 month, when the various public bodies cried out, the Bar Association, National Integrity Action, whether it relates to Petrojam, when nothing was happening until there were media reports every day, social media went alight, so that the issue of, for high society, not for lowly people, they need no exposure. They don't wear a mask in St. Thomas. The young lady is picked up and she's fined $200,000, right? So there's an inequity in the rule of law, which is what is reducing public trust and confidence, not just in existing political leaders, but the entire democratic system in Jamaica, so that the surveys done in 2018 for the hemisphere show that Jamaica has the highest proportion of its population, which is now saying to deal with two things, the twins, crime and corruption, you need an authoritarian solution. Now that's the amber light on the dashboard. And therefore, Bruce, when we look at current situations, you put the small man before the courts immediately. Real cases, a man thief act him, shouldn't thief it. He's before the courts in 3 months and sentenced to 6 months. A few years ago, a minister of state is charged. His case takes 6 years, 27 witnesses, and at the end of the day, no case to answer. Currently, former Minister Reid is before the courts. Each year, it's now 2 years, we hear issues raised, perhaps justifiably by very clever defense lawyers, because that's what the 2007 Justice Sector Task Force report pointed to, that the well-heeled litigant is able to get the kind of justice, so to speak, before the courts, which the poor man, despite the legal aid systems which have been strengthened and which NIA has been working with the Legal Aid Council, he can't get.
Well, I noticed that the Chief Justice has been expressing some exasperation with that.
Exactly so, but the Chief Justice himself, and again, the importance of leadership. Institutions matter, their design matter, but leadership matters. In the case of the current Chief Justice, he's building on the work of the previous Chief Justice, and we now have guidelines for the conduct of judges. We never had that before. We have sentencing guidelines where you and I can go and see what are the matters that a judge has to take into account in sentencing any individual. If we want to think the guidelines are inadequate, then we can make representation. And thirdly, most importantly, for the first time, we have a strategic plan for the judiciary. which deals with one of the issues we raised earlier on, which is court backlog. So every 3 months, you and I and any Jamaican citizen can go on the website of the Supreme Court, the parish courts, and you can see the extent to which they are dealing with the indicators that are set out as part of the plan. And one of them, of course, is reduction in case backlog. And I'm happy to say that there's very significant progress being made in that perennial area, which has hampered our ability to deal with the criminal justice issues as far as we had them. But I wanted to say one thing, Bruce, and that is in governance, report after report tells us what is to be done. Where I think we have fallen down in diagnosis, and probably you and I may have to have another program to discuss that, is how is it to be done? And we have sufficient experience now to indicate that to get over serious resistance from vested interests who benefit from the existing governance arrangements, you really do need what is called multi-stakeholder engagement. Let me go back as far as in the 1970s and coming forward to the Electoral Commission reform. Remember the extent to which citizens' action for free and fair elections had to be involved with you and the Electoral Commission, as it wasn't that then, the Electoral Advisory Committee, Archbishop Carter. I remember being vice chairman of the cafe at the time, engaging not just the government, but interested stakeholders getting involved. Similarly with the fiscal crisis, where you, in fact, proposed in 2010 that fiscal responsibility legislation should be passed, but it was the engagement of EPOC that combined the multi-stakeholder group that was able to get us back on track in terms of fiscal responsibility. And today, we have the Consensus Crime Management Oversight Committee. And in agreeing with Alvin, I would say that this is the body which involves both the government, Prime Minister Holness, leader of the opposition, Phillips as he was then, 20-odd civil society groups, including National Integrity Action, have put together and come to an agreement on 26 deliverables in August of 2020. We are now in January of 2022. 6 or 7 of the 26 have been agreed on. Again, in my opinion, not enough public pressure because the public doesn't know enough about these deliverables, some of which relate exactly to the crime pandemic that we are now facing.
My problem is that I'm out of time, but what I want to do, and I want to sort of get a commitment from you. We are a single issue program, no? Every Monday we focus on one single issue and we go as deep as we can into it. I want to do a program on citizen engagement. The extent to which I don't want to overstate it, right? Because there has been a huge difference when you look at citizen activism now compared to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
I agree with that program, Bruce.
But there is so much more that can be done, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is that citizen engagement in our country, in our history, comes and goes in cycles. There are peaks and troughs, and right now we are in a trough, but I'm seeing signs that we may be coming out of it with the multiplication of whistleblower reports to the Auditor General's office, as reported in our last annual report last year. So that's a top subject we need to really interrogate, and I commit to you that as soon as you're ready, I am ready. And we won't have no phone problem in the
let's plan to get back to that. But thank you very much, Professor Trevor Monroe, Executive Director of National Integrity Action.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you so much, Trevor. That brings us to the end of the program. Another program, Jamaica Live on Bridge 99. Thank my producer, my studio engineer, the whole of the Bridge 99 team here that treats me so well when I come here. So thank you all very much. And I look forward to seeing you when I come back next week, Monday at midday. Jamaica Live on Bridge 99.